spotlights and the flowers.
Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week. We are going way back in time, and we are also joined by our two special guests who we will introduce momentarily. But first, Chris, I will kick it over to you. How are you, my friend?
Man, if you told me that one day we'd be sitting here and there would be four people, four metalheads talking about a Monkees album, and then you told me which album we were talking about, I don't know. I don't know how I would have reacted to that information. So this is exciting. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I have a feeling at least I am going to learn a thing or two from Carrie, the resident Monkees expert. So I thought I knew a lot about the Monkees, but he schools me. So I'm glad that he's here to provide his expertise, and we decided to drag Justin and Sean in on this too. So should be fun.
I am looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to it for quite some time. I've got thoughts. I will share them all throughout the course of this episode. But I want to kick it over to Carrie and Sean from the MSR cast. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. It is our pleasure to have you on. And, last time we had you on, we talked about some Merciful Fate. This is not Merciful Fate. This is nothing like
that,
it.
Right?
This is a far cry from Merciful Fate, but we thank you again for joining us.
Well, thank you again for having us back. Like Chris has mentioned, we're both Monkey nerds, and this album, I know we're going to get into some of the meat and potatoes and details of it, but this is a very different and special album, and it's very polarizing even in the Monkees fan community. So I thought it was a perfect album to really dissect on this show, because there are some elements on this album that are very different from the band, what they usually would do in tone, and not just guitar tone, but lyrics and a whole bunch of different stuff we're going to get into. I thought that would be perfect.
In terms of metal, it's not a metal album, obviously. It's the Monkees, but we dip our toe kind of close to certain pools that one might say are borderline metal. So it's fascinating.
It gets a little grungy, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
They're trying to hit that sweet spot, and this came out in apa, so they're trying to hit
fitting for the time.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that. I noticed that right away. But Sean, I want to ask you, what was your exposure to the Monkees prior to this week and prior to this album? And be honest, was this like your first foray into 1960s bubblegum pop?
The only thing about the Monkees that I knew was that they had done there's the Hey Hey There We're the Monkees song, and then there's Daydream Believer. That was the only thing I knew.
This is great. This is great because we have you as like the complete novice, me who's at most one or two steps above you, and then our two resident experts who are just going to teach me so I can sit back and listen on an album that, by and large, like I said, I think you get 10 different opinions if you ask 10 different people.
Well, and the thing is, I knew the one thing I do is I know all the guys' names because Carrie, being the Monkees fan that he is, has talked about them ceaselessly. So somehow these names like Peter Tork and Mike Nesmith and Davy Jones, or I can't remember the other guy's name. So I know 3 out of the 4 Monkees.
All right.
So
you know all the 3 dead ones.
Mickey Dolenz, the guy you
there
got
you
the tattoo of. Yeah. So
spoiler.
There you go.
Well, like I said, this is going to be interesting. Let me just set the table before we kind of dive into this. The Monkees obviously were a classic band from the 60s, kind of coming in after Beatlemania had been in full force and effect. And this band kind of went on hiatus in many regards, I guess, after the late 60s and hadn't put out an album since, I think, 1968. And then all of a sudden, in 1996, the band puts out an album seemingly out of nowhere called Justice, and that's spelled Justus. And it came out October 15th of 1996. So it had been what, 28 years since their last release, and so much has changed. Both both in America, socially, civilly, musically. I mean, just so much had happened in that 28 years, and you can kind of hear how, at least in my opinion, there were certain parts of this album that sounded like classic Monkees. And then there were other parts of the album that sounded like a completely different band. And I think that was like kind of the most fascinating thing, for me. Chris, I'm going to ask you, as a fan of the band, what was your exposure and appreciation for this particular album as someone who obviously was familiar with all the classic material?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because, when I grew up listening to the Monkees, it was kind of the mid to late 80s. And at the time, they had released a new album in 87 called Pool It. And it was all, three of the four Monkees, everybody but Mike Nesmith involved. And I knew that album just as well as I knew any of the old stuff too. Like that was just part and parcel of my Monkees education.
Yeah,
it
I
just
love
happened
Bullet.
to be. Yeah, I do too.
One of the worst album covers ever, but one of their best albums.
Yes, this Justice had 6 less nipples, and we couldn't be happier about it. So I was really familiar with that album from 1987, but this album came out in 1996. At this point, I'm already a tried and true Monkees fan. I know all the old stuff, and my cousin who basically brought me into this Monkees world. She bought this CD. I think she listened to it once, didn't think much of it, and literally handed it to me. It was like, "You have it." And I never really sat down and listened to it for a long time until, Carrie and I were playing Monkees Hurdle, and he was always just incredulous that I didn't know most of the songs from this album, and that's kind of how the discussion came about. Like, we should move this to a podcast forum and talk about it that way. And like I mentioned earlier, we dragged you and Sean into this, but
And so for that, I apologize too.
So I'd say I knew the opening track very well because it was from, the late 60s and it was re-recorded. And the song You and I also I knew quite well, but honestly, the rest of the album I just did not know really well. So this was kind of an education for me, even as a Monkees fan. This one kind of just fell by the wayside for me, especially because in 96 was such a weird time for me because I was in between my grunge / alt rock phase and about to become like a real metalhead. And this was right in between where I kind of felt a little bit lost when it came to music and why I would really, become so into metal because I felt like there was this musical void in my life, and I guess this album didn't do anything to help at the time. But I would pass it along to Carrie and just ask what your history with this album is. I
remember. This was back in the day where you had to actually go buy a CD before you heard anything. I remember going to the store, picking it up. And not taking the CD out of my disc player in my car for a while. And anybody who got in my car was forced to listen to it. And apologies to all my friends back in the day. But, it's – and we're going to get into more of the details on it, but I really – there's elements of this album that surprised me when it first came out and still surprised me to this day that they got away with some of the things that they did. Some of the guitars they can be really heavy. And I'll get into some specifics, but I always got a lot of doom metal elements off of this album with some of the songs. And the first time I ever heard it, I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty heavy for what they are. I wish the guitars could have been a little bit, tuned more heavy, but you got to give credit to these guys because this is the first album since Headquarters they actually all wrote and performed on, all four Monkees. It's the second album they've ever done that they did all that together. Every single other album has been other musicians and other songwriters and all kinds of things, but
Yeah, and
For better or worse, that's what you got here.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did they write all the songs on Headquarters, or were there outside writers for some of the songs on
There
the
was some
album?
outside writers, yeah, for some.
So
of those tracks.
this
Yeah.
would be the only album they've ever done where they all wrote their own songs. Because even Good Times, which would come out, about, I don't know, 15 years or so after this.
Yeah.
That had guest writers, so to
Yep.
speak, as well. So this is kind of a special album just because the band was always derided for not writing their own music and not performing their own instruments.
It's an anomaly too. And it came along with there was like a long playing show that they had like on ABC or something like that went along with this album too. If you haven't watched that, it's very 90s. That's all I can say.
yeah, well, I'll say this. This was not at all what I was expecting given my limited knowledge of the band. And I have to think that Chris probably shared the same sentiment because this is different. It's just a very different album, but timely. Like, this is, I mean, maybe a little bit late to the game, but like this album in many ways does scream mid-90s. And it was kind of the tail end of that grungy alt rock thing that Chris was talking about earlier, right before like the real pop bands would start coming on the scene in like the later part of the 90s. So timely to say the least. As we begin to go through this, I would encourage you guys, we always pick a song of the week here. So I'm going to ask you guys to do the same as we kind of go through this and kind of the one song that stuck out to you. I had narrowed it down to two. I think I know which one I'm going to choose. But with that backdrop, I think we just kind of get into it at this point. This album starts, and let me say it's only 12 tracks, but because it's the Monkees, it clocks in at just under 40 minutes. Although I guess some of these songs are longer by their standards because those older classic tracks, some of them are 2 minutes in length.
Yeah.
But here we start with Circle Sky, a Nesmith track, which I had no idea that this song had come out in 1968. Again, showing my naivety when it comes to this band, but this was like a remake of an earlier song.
Carrie, jump in.
I'll jump in, like pull it, man. Circle Sky is one of my favorite tracks by them. The version on this album, it's not my favorite, I'll be honest with you. Compared to like some of the other heavy guitar stuff they did on this album, I think they could have taken it further. This sounds like classic Monkees. And sadly, it's the only lead vocal from Nesmith on this album. He does some background vocal but this is the only lead vocals he does on the album, which is a shame,
Yeah, I agree with that. He has other songwriting credits, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize, like, I had always assumed that he at least sang on like 2 songs on this. I didn't really realize it was just the one, and it was kind of that older song. It was one of the handful of new songs that the band had released for the soundtrack for the Head movie that came out in 68 or 69.
68, yeah. Perfect song for that movie is just, and this doesn't, and that actually, the live version, whatever they call it, from the Head movie, feels a little bit heavier than this,
Yeah, this is kind of, I feel like they didn't really deviate too far from the original too much, where they probably could have been a little bit more daring. I'm curious what you other two fellas thought of this track, because I'll say this, I was going to wait till the end, but I'm afraid I'll just forget it. So I'll just say that overall, this album reminded me a lot of Halloween's Chameleon album, in that it felt like a number of different guys doing a solo album, but on one album. It's like everybody kind of contributed their ideas.
I honestly think you hit the nail on the head there, man. It's because some of these songs, like some of the Mickey songs where he was demoing before this album came out earlier, and some of the Peter Tork stuff the same way. Davy Jones, they pulled something from an album he already released and they just redid it. So I think you're right. I think that I don't want to say it feels completely disjointed, but it does a little bit.
No, it's all over the place. I have some really strong thoughts about this track, but I want to kick it over to Sean. Talk to me about your first like real Monkees foray and Circle Sky here.
I mean, because the '60s kind of tone to this, that's kind of what I thought this entire thing would sound like. And I didn't think that this was an old song. I just thought like, oh, okay, so they're trying to like do an album that sounds like it's from the '60s. And the production was kind of like set back, and then all of a sudden, when the next song would kick in, you realize that was an aberration. And so it was okay. I mean, the little rhythmic kind of guitar riff there, I thought it was okay, but it's not a song that like stuck with me. It just stuck with me because the production was so faded out, so washed out or whatever. And the vocals are like pushed all the way in the back. The production of this album really bothered me all throughout. I'll just say that. Like it was always changing, always shifting. Sometimes it sounded like it was compressed too much or it was brittle or something. And this is one of the songs where I was like, if they had just done this sound all throughout, I think I could have handled a lot of this. So I don't know. This is like a song where I think like maybe they should have gone this direction for the entire album.
So, ironically enough, for the first time, I think in Metal Exchange history, the first track is my song of the week. I love this song. And when I heard the song, I had no idea that this was like I said, a song from so many years ago. So the second we're done, I'm going to go listen to the original because I have to hear it now. But when I first heard this thing, I couldn't believe how heavy the riffs were for the Monkees, right? Like I just couldn't believe that they had recorded a song like this. And the vocals gave me this like 70s rock vibe, like this Zeppelin meets the Who thing going on with the aid of the modern production. And even the really subtle keys that you'd hear behind like the pre-chorus and stuff. I thought it was a nice touch, and I was like hooked from the beginning. And I said to myself, this album is going to be fantastic if it's all like this. It wasn't, and we'll get into that in a bit. But let's give Circle Sky a listen, and we'll come back in a minute.
It's a very extraordinary scene to those who don't understand. But once you have seen, you must believe. Believe if you can. If you can. Hamilton, smiling now.
So that was Circle Sky, the 1996 version. A really interesting start to the album. But again, what kind of lost me, and Sean kind of alluded to this a bit earlier, more so on the production side, but for me, it was more of a flow issue, especially towards the back third of the album. I think things get real weird back there. I mean, really weird, but we'll get there. The second track is called Never Enough. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just start with this one because every time I heard this song, I was convinced I was listening to Tom Petty, like convinced. And I'm like, if you would have had this as a B-side on a Tom Petty single, I would have been like, yeah, well, that makes sense. Great vocal harmonies, a beautiful melody throughout. And I like how the verses just seamlessly flow into the chorus. Now, obviously, it's going to be different than a Halloween or a Stratovarius or something like that. But knowing what the Monkees are, I thought this song was just really beautifully constructed with this quaint instrumental section, which just kind of made things different enough that it really kept your attention, with some of the best vocal performances on the album. Now, I don't think I liked it as much as Circle Sky, but for me, I was 2 for 2 right off the bat.
Yeah, I will say I think that Mickey, who sings on this track, and wrote this track as well, is probably the best of the four vocalists as a vocalist. He just has such a. I know like a lot of classic rock musicians always said that Mickey Dolenz was an underrated vocalist, and really underrated a lot of things. Like he was a really, considering he came from show business as like a show business kid, and really didn't have musical experience. Like I think became one of the most accomplished of the four members of the band. So I'm glad to hear that you like this song. I really just didn't remember it that well, and it ended up being one of the songs I looked forward to hearing when I would go back and listen to it. It's got kind of a bluesy, kind of just mid-tempo, like chill kind of vibe to it, and I think I'll keep the ball rolling. I think I'll make this one my song of the week. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. I thought it was really, really good, and I just think Mickey's, even now, like and Carrie can tell us, seeing that he's seen Mickey sing live recently, that if he still got it, and I saw him 2 years ago, and he definitely still had it 2 years ago. So I like this one quite a bit. I had a tough time trying to decide which song to pick, but I feel like this song is as good as any. So let's give this one a listen, and then we'll hear Carrie and Sean's thoughts on this one.
It's always too late and not enough for you. I've often heard you say you've got to seize the day, but when your life is gone, oh how it's gone for so long. But there are often times when life is not so kind, and there are those around who need your feet on the ground. And it's not enough, it's never enough. I don't stand a chance to fill your sweet loving cup, 'cause it's not enough, it's never enough, it's not enough for you.
So we're 2 songs in. We've got 2 songs of the week. Sean, your thoughts on Never Enough, hearing it for the first time this week?
It's like an innocuous song. It's not offensive in any way. There's no, to me, like when I listen to a song, even like just a rock song or a pop song, there should be some sort of build between the verse and the bridge and the chorus, and it just never takes off. It's just like, if you drew the song as like a visual, it'd just be a straight line.
So it's on the runway; it just never flies.
Yeah, and that kind of irritated me. But like the at the end, when all the layered vocals, the harmony vocals come in, I was like, okay, that's something. That was okay. But it seems like when they were mixing or recording the song, they like slowed it down more than it needed to be, because it sounds so slow, like painfully slow. And it's like, I think this tempo needs to be a little up. So I don't know. It's just those reasons I wasn't wild on it.
And maybe it's that tempo that you kind of referenced earlier that gave you those Doom vibes, Carrie. Do you hear it on this track, or not so much?
This is not really the one I was referring to, but yeah, I mean, not my favorite track on the album. It's one of my favorite Mickey performances. I think he's really strong on this track. So there was an album that just came out through 7A Records called Demos I Sell. It's all Mickey old demos from around 80s, 90s, all that era. And this is one of the tracks that was on it. And this is definitely the better version of that song. It's really, when you talk about, there's only one Nesmith track on here that he sang, only one Peter Tork, which is per the usual. And the rest are split between Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones. This album feels like Mickey Dolenz was the strongest performer on the album, comparatively to everybody else. And like we talked about earlier, we have to give everybody credit because they played all the instruments on this album. And Chris alluded to that, when they first started, Mickey was not a drummer. He learned to play the part of a drummer on the TV show. And on this album, I think he proves that he's not like, you're not going to compare him with John Bonham or anybody like that, but he was a competent drummer. He had some good stuff on this album. And I wish he did more of it after this, but he didn't really, you know.
I think that's a really good synopsis. The drums on the album, by and large, do hold this thing together. Now, I'm not saying it's the most complex music in the world, but at the end of the day, you know, it fills the void that you need on the low end for sure, and it does drive the train along. And I think a good example of that, ironically enough, is the next track here, which is "Oh What a Night," because this track, at least for my money, was very much like that old Monkees sound. This is what I kind of expect when I listen to the Monkees, right? This album would have fit really nicely in 1966, in my opinion. But I'll give my thoughts in a bit. Chris, I'll kick it to you. "Oh What a Night." Talk to me about the third track.
Oh, what a horrible night to have a curse.
Little throwback to last week. Davy Jones never disappoints when you want to hear something that kind of fits that Monkees, you know. It's a wild box that the songs fit into, but a box nonetheless. And you know, I ended up really kind of digging this song after hearing it a few times. It reminded me of like going to like a resort and sitting by the pool and listening to like a Jimmy Buffett song. It's like it's got kind of a vacation-y vibe. Just very like, I don't know, almost like has like a hula tempo.
Yeah, right. It does.
But I think it's a pretty good little song. I always loved Davey. He was never like my favorite Monkee, and I always feel like he kind of gets a bad rap from some of the hardcore fans because he's the guy who sang "Daydream Believer" and he was the heartthrob and everything. But and a lot of times like the songs that he tends to sing on are the more kind of like saccharine love type. Love. And this is not, you know, terribly off that, you know, characteristic, but I think it's a nice little tune and does not fit whatsoever with the two songs that preceded it.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I know you spoke about a vacation. Sean, did you want to take a vacation after you heard the track? I want to hear your thoughts.
Easily the most listenable song on the first half of the album. I actually thought it was okay. All the lead guitar work was really good. And I really did like the vocals. And you said that this guy, so there's Davy Jones, and he sang on Daydream Believer?
Correct.
Okay, so that kind of jibes. Like I thought, like, yeah, this is like whoever's singing on this song is way better than whoever's singing on the rest of the album. I couldn't figure out if they were. I don't know what the Monkees do. I just figured there was like two singers or something. But, good vocals. And what I wrote in my notes is kind of reminds me of a Jimmy Buffett song.
Nice.
Wow, there you go.
Nice.
And you know, I'll say this to agree with you guys. It had a really uplifting feel to it, and for me, I was 3 for 3 after this. I'll admit. We fall off a cliff after this thing, but the first 3 tracks, I'm totally on board. It had that really, really solid start. And again, I felt good after listening to this track, and maybe that's got the whole vacation-y Jimmy Buffett thing going. Carrie, your thoughts?
So, I agree with everything that you said. It's so interesting to hear it from Sean's point of view because he's such a beginner. But yeah, Davey was known for doing the saccharine, sweet love songs. He was the heartthrob and all that. And it might be unpopular opinion, but he's my least favorite vocalist in the band.
He's the best one. I can hear it. He's the best. He sang Daydream. He sang on the hit.
No, it's not their only hit though. We're not getting in the weeds on this stuff. We're not going to argue, but
please argue away.
That was like the biggest hit that he did sing. You know what I mean? If you think about it, like Pleasant Valley Sunday and Last Train to Clarksville, all that was stuff with Mickey. So
I'm a Believer.
Yeah. So, but he got lumped into that, you know, front man of the band type of vibe because he was the cute one. You know, not that I'm saying he was the cute one, whatever, but. I mean, just proof right here on my arm. Like, if you're watching, I just got an autographed Mickey Dolenz tattoo, so that sort of takes me out of the whole equation, I guess. You know what I mean? You can tell. But I mean, yeah, I like the song. It's not my favorite track on the album though. Which is weird. I like the Davey tracks, but they never tend to be my favorite. Because
Very good.
he had some stinkers in his career. For sure.
But this wasn't one of them. So
Definitely not one of them.
I think that when the Monkees were being produced in the early years, like they looked at him as the closest link to the Beatles because,
Sure.
you know, he was. I'm fairly sure he's from the same town in England as in. They were Manchester. He was Manchester.
No. The Beatles were from Liverpool. He was from Manchester.
Oh,
right?
okay, got it.
Close, but
Yeah. So, but I think that they were trying to, at least with him, pull in some of that already, you know, that Beatles fandom that was already existing. So, it's interesting to see how he evolved into like the 80s and 90s and those two albums that they released during that time. I'm kind of with Carrie. I have kind of a real love-hate relationship with Davey songs, depending on, you know, which ones there are. There's some that I think are really, when he goes out of the box a little bit, I think that's when he really shines, when it gets a little bit away from he has like a show tunes kind of background, and that's kind
very
of
show tuny. Yeah, he was like an Oliver and all that kind of stuff, and
right.
Even with him in the band before he had passed away, the Monkees shows with him felt very Las Vegas review style, very, you know, show tune versions of everything. Wasn't my favorite era. And not saying that it took his death to get there, but after he had passed, I went and saw that first tour they did with Nesmith back in the band. Cause he realized, well, look, we're not all going to be forever. So let's just do it. And it felt like a garage band just jamming again. And that's what their feeling was towards the end of it, you know, and Mickey's still continuing. So
I'll say that was, you know, I saw the Monkees in a lot of different incarnations, never all four at once, but,
right.
The Mickey, Mike, and Peter trio was I saw them only once, but that was my favorite.
Me too.
Of all the Monkees. I think I've seen some formation of the band 4 or 5 times, but that was my favorite because it really felt like a rock concert.
Yeah, it felt like you're hanging out in the garage while they were jamming. It was great. Mickey was back on drums during some songs, but I originally saw them back in like '87 when they first were getting popular again, and it was very like review style show.
It's interesting because you talk about everyone's songwriting and kind of the different flavor they bring to the band, but there's one track on here which is actually a collaboration where it's Mickey and Davey, and that's the next track, You and I. It clocks in at just under 3 minutes. I've got some thoughts about this one as well, but I'm going to start with you, Carrie. What are your thoughts on this one? Because I thought this was a really kind of an oddball track for reasons I'll get to in a second.
I mean, I don't hate this track. It was from an early song that they've basically redone.
Okay.
And it sounds good. It's I do like the harmonies between Davey and Mickey. They have really good harmonies. Like Kisuke and like in Avantasia, when, you know, I think they're one of the, when they sing together, when all the guys sing together, like especially Mickey and Michael Nesmith, when they harmonize on some of the later albums, it sounds really, really good. But you can tell that this is definitely written for Davey. I don't know if Mickey would have sounded as good singing this track because it's a lovey-dovey track.
No question about that. Sean, any thoughts on this one?
Vocals were okay. All the lead guitar stuff, like the whole razzle dazzle lead guitar licks, were cool. Again, it just had that same problem as where it's just that straight line, you know. And I'm just looking for that something to take off, and it never does. And it's just, the song feels flat. It's weird because like when I heard this, the thing that came to mind was Queensryche, Here and the Now Frontier, like some of the songs on that album, where like I spent a lot of time with that album, and I would always be bothered by like how flat some of the stuff seemed on there. I was like, this does not feel like Queensryche.
Especially when you
And-
compare it to the earlier Queensryche material, which always
Yeah.
had a big build, and there was like the big choruses on Mindcrime and things like that.
where it would just rocket off into the stratosphere. But
I never thought somebody would compare the Monkeys track to Queensryche, but there we go.
I don't know why it came in my
I have a comparison, but I assure you it is not Queensryche, and that's the beauty of this, that we can all hear kind
Yeah.
of different things in this. Chris, any thoughts on this track?
Yeah, this was the one I knew the most, not counting Circle Sky, just because it was kind of the go-to track from this album that would make it onto like a lot of the compilations and
Yeah.
the greatest hits albums. And I think it's pretty much like a classic Monkeys song, just a really like good feeling, kind of upbeat. I thought that I thought the bass line was just really prominent on this song. That I always really like this. I just think it's a nice song. It's a feel good song. It's not my favorite on the album. It's not my favorite Monkeys song, but I just think it's like a really solid tune. I don't know. I always really kind of liked it, and I don't feel any differently now.
This song did not do anything for me. I think as the week went on, I appreciated it a little bit more. But I think what it comes back to is that every time I listen to that acoustic guitar intro, I keep thinking of that song "Kiss Me" by Sixpence, whatever the hell they're called.
Oh my
Another
gosh,
Richard.
yeah.
And I can't unhear it, and I hated that song, and so it's like a guilt by association. But you listen to this song, listen
you
to that
just
intro,
ruined the
and
song for
you'll
me.
never
My
I
God.
guarantee you'll never unhear it.
It's that
And as a
jangly
result,
guitar, yeah, I can
I
hear it.
wrote the damn thing off. Although ironically, Sixpence None the Richer stole the song because they wrote it 3 years later. So plagiarism for them, but it ruined the Monkey song for me. On to the next track.
Well,
So
I
you
want to
should
say
have
my,
been and She's All That, and not
Yeah.
not that other song.
right. I do want to say I do want to focus on the bass lines on this track. I really love the bass work that Peter does. It's just some cool bending stuff. It's not like super because it's supposed to be a slower track, But I think his bass really stands out for me.
Yeah, I respect to the song for that. It just I couldn't get over the first 15 seconds, so it was hard for me to listen to the rest. But Unlucky Stars is the next track, and it's a real pivot here. When you think the band is going in one direction, they completely zig and zag, and now they go to a 50s doo-wop sound, which was like completely unexpected. If I'm lying, I'm lying, but like tell me that this doesn't sound like 50s doo-wop. The difference, though, for me is that unlike a band like Virgo, which was that Andre Matos project where they had a song that was like it, I thought it was really fresh and inspired, and for some reason I loved it on that album. But here, it's an easy listen. I enjoy the piano. It's just a bit mundane, and to Sean's point, this one never takes off for me. It's just like they milked the one idea for 3 minutes, and this was a bit of a miss for me as well. I appreciate the experimentation. I don't particularly like the execution. Chris, you want to tell me I'm wrong?
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
This song grew on me a little bit as the week went on. This is an album full of outliers, and this one's another one. It feels a little, I don't know, masturbatory, like that Mickey just wanted to do like a look at me sing like this kind of, I have to admit the vocal performance in and of itself is really good. It just feels really, out of place, on the rest of the album. Although it is kind of it's kind of a neat song, and you're right. It does kind of have a even Monkeys era vibe to it. And I don't know, Carrie, you can chime in if you think I'm wrong, but I don't think the Monkeys ever had a song that sounded like this
Not
before
really.
or after.
I mean, it definitely, I can see that 50s doo-wop, like it has like a bluesy vibe to it. And for that, it's never been my favorite, but I can appreciate the song, and I don't skip it. If I listen to a Monkeys album, there's only very few songs I've ever skipped. And Davey is saying most of those. Like all I have to say is Ladies Aid Society, whatever that song is, and If We Fell in Love. Oh, there's some bad stuff.
That might be the worst Monkees song
Yes.
of all time. If
but-
you could even call it a song, it's just
Yeah,
baby
it's like
talking
spoken
over
word.
some instruments.
It's a spoken word love song, whatever. But I do like the song. Towards the end, he really starts to feel it and gets into it, and you could hear it in his voice. And it's I never thought about it being like a 50s doo-wop song, but I can't unhear that now, you know?
I could picture him singing it in that basement restaurant from Boy Meets World,
Right.
when they sang "My Girl" on that one episode.
Yes.
I feel like after the credits rolled, Mickey got up on stage and sang this by himself, and it's kind of how I picture him, with like the spotlight on him, and it's just him. That's just me.
My goal is to make you never listen to this album the same way again. So I'm 2 for 2, or at least on my 2 attempts to really shape you guys.
You're
But-
succeeding so far.
Nice. I like it. But Sean, this has got to be unlike anything you've ever heard, let alone anything you ever thought you'd cover on a metal podcast.
Well, yeah, for sure that. But I mean, it's funny that because Chris mentioned the movie thing or the TV thing, and that's what I thought. I was like, this is like something that would be in like the back, like when the character went into a bar in a movie, and this would be the thing that's playing on the speakers in the background, and it would just be part of the background noise. It wasn't like offensive or anything. It just never. There's no hook really. Nothing grabbed me. All the guitar musicality is cool. I think the lead guitar playing throughout the album is pretty much like one of the more interesting elements of it.
That's all Nesmith, baby.
But this is, I mean, as a song, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't really go anywhere. It just seems like kind of pointless almost.
Yeah, listen, I think that's fair, and it is different. And then we go to Admiral Mike, which is another like wacky song. But this one I really liked as well. And I don't know why this track was so trippy, for a number of reasons, but I'll let somebody else do the honor. So please, somebody jump in and talk to us about, Admiral Mike.
I will jump in and say this is my track of the week.
Nice. This was in contention for me as well. It was this or the first track, but why is it yours?
I've always loved this track. It's written by Nesmith, but it's not sung by him. It's sung by Mickey. Nesmith has always been a wordsmith. And if you look at the lyrics, it's all about, how we're being sold stuff all the time and we just go with it. There's some, great lyrics in this track, but guitar is so heavy in the song, comparatively to what they usually would do. And this is the first song when I heard the album the very first time, I was like, wow, they're trying something that's not in their wheelhouse for sure. They're definitely trying to grunge it up a little bit, but I really love the drum sound in the song. It's a little bit slower but heavier, and I definitely get some doom elements off this track.
Nice. Let's give it a listen, find out what it is you're referring to, and we'll come back in a bit. So, really interesting choice. I'm glad you picked that for the song of the week. I think that this song gave me such heavy grunge vibes, right? Like just dirty, angry, and the two bands that came to mind were Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. So it was like their attempt at the Seattle grunge scene just about 2 or 3 years after the fact.
I am so happy you just said Alice in Chains because I always get that vibe from this track. Because Alice in Chains were thrown into that grunge, but they were always a little bit heavier and a little bit more that slow, doomier style to them, from especially where they were from. But yeah, I've always got that vibe from this track. I'm glad you said that.
Sean, any thoughts on this one? I have a feeling this might have struck a chord one way or another.
Man, like, and this is why I didn't do any research on the Monkees beforehand, because I didn't want like any criticism to seem personal. Like, I just listened to the album.
No,
dude, I hate this song. Like,
Really?
I've been replaying everything we've been as we've been talking about in the background. I couldn't even put this song on. I never want to hear it again the rest of my life. I absolutely hate it. Like, the vocals suck, the whiny, annoying, the awful guitar tone. That is what when people like when people describe like a guitar tone that's like I mean, I have a hard time with like a lot of fuzzy guitars unless they're in the proper context, like kind of dreamy alternative rock. I like it in that aspect. Like, grunge was never really my thing. So this guitar tone, it's like someone's like, nails on a chalkboard almost for me. And the whiny vocals towards the end, especially, and the tempo and the entire thing, the songwriting.
Can you guys still hear him? I think he's cut out for me.
It was painful for me to listen to this song. Yeah.
So it's fair to say it's not your song of the week, Chris. What did you think about it?
I don't know. I'm just. I think Carrie's going to be looking for a new co-host for it.
No, we said we're going in here with no hard feelings.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
I'm worried about leaving with the hard feelings, not so much the going in part.
No, it's all good.
I didn't like this song at first, and it grew on me. It's arguably the most aggressive vocal performance of any Monkees song that I can think of. It does have a lot of vile or a lot of bile like behind it. The guitar tone reminded me a lot of like 80s Clapton. That's just a really chunky guitar sound. That's kind of what that reminded me of. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm really interested in just the very different opinions of everybody on this one. I'm kind of middle of the road on this one. I don't hate it, but it's not one of my favorites on the album either. But
the song is very polarizing. Then
yeah, but I do like that they went for something like a little bit like grungy and like dirty and like I don't know, like just a little bit harsh.
So that all being said, I thought it was an interesting way to close out side one. Side two of this album, or the B-side, if you will, some really weird stuff. One of the better tracks, in my opinion, is the next one, Dying of a Broken Heart. This is a really funky tune. The bass lines are really prominent. And when you talk about the band actually playing their own music, for me, this is actually one of the best examples. The bass lines on this particular tune, I got like a Red Hot Chili Peppers vibe with some blues guitar thrown over the top. So it's almost like Red Hot Chili Peppers meets Chuck Berry, which is never something I thought I would say on this podcast either, but alas, here we are, and this is the week. Hard for me to really kind of make heads or tails out of it. It's almost all over the place. And the composition itself almost reminded me of like 70s prog rock with like a Yes or a Genesis or something, just because, or a King Crimson. The song was all over the place. I think I actually liked it, but I can't say for sure. I don't even know if I have an opinion on this one yet. Sean, any better on this one, or are we just swinging and missing throughout here?
I mean, slightly better because all the guitar flourishes were nice. It reminded me of Dire Straits. I don't know if that's a bad comparison or not.
I think that's pretty apt.
Yeah,
but so yeah, it sort of really in the album. It reminded me of like of You and I, sort of like those two being paired together almost. Interesting rhythm stuff in here. It just didn't really stick with me. I guess this kind of rock is not really for me, but
Sean, at some point you do have to pick a song of the week, so I just want to put that out there. It is a requirement when you're on the Metal Exchange. Chris,
he's gonna pick a song from the Merciful Fate album we did the last time we got together.
That's funny. Chris, go ahead. Tell me your thoughts of "Dying of a Broken Heart."
Yeah, this is another one that's kind of middle of the road for me. It's definitely a really groovy tune, and I think it's kind of a necessary palate cleanser after the last song was just so like kind of. I don't know if dark is the word you want to use, but just kind of like grimy. And this one's just a little bit cleaner. And I couldn't get out of my head. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Juice Newton song "Queen of Hearts" from like 1981. It's like an old, kind of like a fairly popular like country. It's a country band, I think, and I have our mutual friend Mike Crea to thank for making me even aware of the song through his Power Hour. But this felt like a slower tempo version of that song to me, and I couldn't just get that out of my head. But it's a solid tune. Not my favorite, but definitely not my least favorite either. Sorry for kind of hedging on that one, but. Curious about Carrie's thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I like this track. It's one of the, like, if you go back to that new album that he put out, the old demos, this is one of the tracks that Mickey has been demoing for years and years before this album came out. You know, I love the line, he says, "I lived through Nixon and a drug or two." That's very, you know, that's very self-fulfilling, I guess. It's like a cathartic lyric for them. But yeah, I mean, it's a really, really cool song. Like you said, Chili Peppers bass lines and it really funky. And I really like some of the harmonies on this track too.
And it provides contrast to the second Mickey Dolenz tune in a row, which is "Regional Girl," the 8th track. Chris, any thoughts on this one? This is definitely different from "Dying of a Broken Heart." So even though it's another Dolenz tune, they sound nothing alike.
Yeah, it kind of kicks off with kind of like oh God, why the name just fell right out of my Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of like guitar riff to kick things off. I almost said Billy Ray Cyrus. That would have been really embarrassing. This is another one that again kind of just didn't hit for me, and wasn't really like a bad one either. I kind of another middle of the road track. I mean, Mickey again does like a hell of a job on vocals, and it kind of almost has like a song you'd hear at a bar that looked kind of like the bar in Roadhouse. But I don't know that I have too much more to add. It just definitely had kind of that kind of almost like Western rock kind of, I don't know, like Stevie Ray Vaughan is just the thing that keeps popping into my head.
So you say Stevie Ray Vaughan, I hear ZZ Top. So, I mean, again,
yeah, that definitely, that makes a lot of sense too.
Maybe we're splitting hairs, but
beard hairs in this case.
Well, yeah. Carrie, I saw you shaking your head at one point. I want to know why.
I was surprised that what you said about the song, Chris. I thought you would dig it. This is if I hadn't picked Admiral Mike, this is probably this is my number 2 or my number 3 song on this album. It's another one of the ones that he did demos for years that they redid for this album. I love the lyrics in this song. He talks about cocaine for the first time ever in a Monkey song. Like that line where it says, "Try to keep the little buggers playing with your pants." I'm like, okay, that's something new for them to talk about. But you know, they mentioned Indiana Jones. How can you hate that?
That was the best line in the song. I want to be clear. That one
I think he just did that just so he can rhyme something. But
sometimes you got to go with it.
If you can't find a rhyme, use Indiana Jones, I guess, is the takeaway here.
Sean, did you like "Reasonable Girl" or not so much?
So the vocalist on this song is the same vocalist on Admiral Mike, right?
Yes.
So I do not like the vocals. Like, they bothered me on this song. And for some reason, and one of the things I wrote in my notes here was the main riff annoys me so much.
Sean, I am with you so much. I hated this
I
song.
hate that riff.
I
hate it.
hated this song. I hated the vocal lines. It reminded me at the start. It almost reminded me of like an old Beatles song, but just not good. And like for something about it, it was just cringy. And every time I heard it, I dreaded the fact that I had to listen to this song. And what's weird is the next track I actually enjoy quite a bit, but Reasonable Girl was just a miss for me. And it's if I never hear it again, I wouldn't complain. And that's why I'm surprised that Carrie liked it so much, because I thought we've been in lockstep for a lot of this, but this one, we are on two different paths on this song, and you're flying high and I'm jumping off the cliff on this one. It is a hard pass for me.
You've parachuted off.
Yeah, I'm off. But I've run away from life, which is actually the next track. But this is a good one. This one has a ton of synthesizer or like that Hammond organ thing going on. A real nod to 70s prog rock on this one. Love the verses, love the chorus. This was easily one of my top 3 songs on the album. A little bit over self-indulgent, but at the same time, I think that they have a right to do that because, listen, they played on the album, so credit to them. And if they want to go into the spacey 70s thing, I'm on board. There's even an organ solo on this thing, so kudos to them. Chris, you're laughing. I know you noticed it as well. Tell me your thoughts on Runaway from Life.
The one thing I wish they would have done on this song was have Peter sing it, because he wrote the song, and Peter was always the quirkiest vocalist of the 4, and I think that would be the nicest way to describe Peter's vocals, but he was always like my favorite as a kid. Even though he sang the least amount of songs, maybe that was what the appeal was that he was kind of, his vocals were more like of a treat. So it would have been, being that he only got one track to sing on, even though he wrote the song, it just, Carrie, tell me if you disagree or not, but I feel like Peter singing this song would have fit right on Pool It.
Oh yeah, it would definitely have fit on his solo album too. Peter was always the underrated vocalist and lyricist, but one of the most prolific instrumentalists in the band. He could play everything really, especially when you saw him live. I'm listening to it right now, and I hear the synth solo in the middle, like, gotta love a good synth solo, right? But
we cover enough prog on the show that they hooked me on that,
right? Peter was definitely known for that kind of stuff, but I would have loved to hear a version with him singing this instead of Davy Jones, because and it's like most of the chorus though, you can hear Mickey more than Davy though, just the way it's produced.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is like the last true rocker on the album before we get to 3 ballads that end it. Sean, Runaway from Life.
He's thinking about it.
This and Regional Girl are vying for the second worst song on the album.
Ooh, interesting.
The verses are so plodding in this song. It's like rhythmic to a fault almost. And there's no real vocal melody that you can latch onto throughout. The synth solo that happens midway through, I'll tell you a story. The first time I heard this album, I had it on random I didn't realize, and I'm driving and this song came on and that synth solo came on. It made me so mad. I yelled F this and switched it to sports radio.
Wow.
So, I can't describe what it is about that synth solo coming in like that. It just, nails on a chalkboard for me. I don't like that tone. I don't like that instrument choice.
That was a pre Dream Theater Jordan Rudess who came in and did that little, jumped in there, and not a lot of people know that.
Yeah.
We're gonna let Sean pick our next album, and this way he gets full retribution on all of us.
I feel like it's the least we could do.
So we get to these 3 ballads at the back end. The first is "I Believe in You." This, again, like I said, the back half of this album was kind of weird because you have all you're zigging and zagging throughout the first 9 tracks, and then you get to these 3 ballads in a row, only one of which clicked for me. You can take your guess as to which one, but it was not I Believe You. And I think the reason here is that even though I like the piano and you feel like you're at a poetry reading when you're snapping your fingers to this thing, for some reason, I just thought it was a little mundane and boring and just, I don't know. It just missed. And I'm not saying it was a bad song. It just didn't click for me this week. Something about it.
We'll check in with you next week and see.
Yeah, maybe I'll like it more when I listen to it a 10th time. I don't know. But tell me I'm wrong. Am I? What was that?
I think you're wrong.
Okay, please tell me why.
This is probably my number 3 track on this album. Not because it's just Peter Tork, but when I talked about those slow doomy elements, this is the first track that comes to mind. This, if a band covered this like a funeral band doom, you wouldn't even bat an eye. Like a Wood of Ypres or something along those lines would work really well with this track. There was like the O's and the all that kind of stuff, and just like the slow tempo and I think this is. I can see like the piano stuff, but if you think about this from that other view, from like being like a doomy track, I think you might appreciate it a little bit more. And it's Peter's only vocal appearance on the album as a lead vocalist, and I think he kills it. He's great.
The vocal performance is good, I will say that. And maybe if I heard, a funeral doom band covering this, I'd have a real newfound respect for it.
Maybe I need to start a funeral doom band that covers this track.
Well, I'll cover that on the Metal Exchange anyway.
Let's do it.
Sean, I guess I'll ask you. Do we get? You had 2 tracks in a row that you hated. Do we pick it up a little bit as we get to the back quarter of this album?
Yeah, because I thought this was at least an interesting idea that was like, okay, so they missed on it, but I could see how, it weirdly reminded me of like REM a little bit.
Okay.
In their weirder moments, and like it's like The Cure, that kind of thing. So I could see it being like a good idea. It just feels underwritten, kind of boring, where it should be. There should be more of a hook somewhere or something more interesting going on. A little repetitive, actually. But yeah, in the context of like a doom metal band, I could see that being interesting, like an interesting cover. It's by far not the worst song on the album. It's at least an interesting
Reasonable
idea.
Girl. I'm just kidding. I think that makes sense. Not my least favorite. Just a pass, not a harsh pass like some of the others. But Chris, any thoughts on this one?
I didn't like the song at all when I first started listening to it, and it grew on me quite a bit, especially the way that the song kind of changes about halfway through. I think it just adds a little bit more of an interesting. It just makes the song a little bit more interesting because it is a little mundane for the first half. The kind of the gate of the piano reminds me of King of Pain by The Police in sort of way.
Yeah.
But the way that like the piano is like kind of like drifts away from the song, it's kind of proggy. Like I don't know. I think this is a really funky tune. It ended up being one of my favorites by the time I was done listening to it. And again, like I'm a Peter guy, so like you come to expect with a Peter song, especially one that he's singing, is going to be a little bit quirkier and a little bit off the beaten path, and usually in a good way though. And I think this is no exception. I thought this was kind of a cool tune, and it really did grow on me as the week went on. But I really do like that part just in the middle of the song where it just kind of almost changes the direction of the song totally, and it really adds another element to it that I think really works.
So obviously a polarizing track on that one as well. We get to another Mickey Dolenz tune with "It's My Life." Again,
I'm so curious if anybody heard what I heard on this track, so I'll let everybody go and see if they say it.
Well, I definitely heard a lot of tambourine, so I'll say that. And it had like a late era Beatles vibe to it, like one of the like a later era Beatles vibe, type thing going on. I can't imagine the song without that tambourine, though. I feel like it actually adds like a nice element to it, and it kind of brings it out of the mundane.
Yeah, you have to give Davey something to do.
Yeah, well, there you go. But it's like kind of, it builds to what I would call like the payoff. So like we talked about the launching point earlier, Sean, so I'll steal your phrase. This one I think actually gets off the ground because by the end it seems to have like a big finish, and I like the vibe on this one. Would you agree with me, or am I crazy?
I guess I'm not hearing what you're hearing. I mean, the one thing I thought the song was actually like, it could have, there seemed to be some kind of build up, but it just didn't pay off for me. But
okay,
the vocalist killed it for me here. So this is Mickey Dolenz again. I guess I just don't like his singing. Or something.
I guess not.
It just bothered me. I was just
Sean
like,
hates my new tattoo, I guess.
I was just like, man, they should have had someone else sing this song because like he sounds out of tune. And I can't get past that. It's distracting to me. So, yeah, it didn't do it for me.
Counterpoint, Chris?
MSR cast, help wanted.
We'll see what album he picks next time.
There you go. Yeah, Carrie's gonna drag Sean's album through the mud now next time. I got just Freddie Mercury vibes from this. This felt like something that he would have sang or would have enjoyed. It just kind of that's all I could hear. It just felt like Mickey Dolenz doing his.
It's a very singer-songwriter style song.
Yeah. It feels like kind of him doing a Queen-like kind of tune, but one of the ones that's really like a Freddie Mercury, focus piece.
I never put those together, but yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah, that's kind of what I heard. I like it. I think that being that this is a metal podcast, I feel like the album would have done well to maybe have something a little heavier towards the end, like finishing off with 3 kind of softer songs. I mean, it is a Monkees album, so you can't really knock them too much for that. But just for me, like typically, I like a little bit more balance towards the end, and it just feels like a kind of.
You make a great point. The track listing, it does feel unbalanced. It definitely at the end.
I agree, and that was part of what I think. I think if you play around with the track order a little bit and mix up these 3 ballads at the end, I think it has I think it would have had a more positive effect on just the overall flow of the album. Yeah. But your thoughts on the song, Carrie?
It's not my favorite Mickey track on the album, but I do enjoy it a lot. Those Queen references, I'm like, oh yeah, it's that Freddie Mercury singer-songwriter, because he wrote and sang on this track. Mickey did. So yeah, I mean, it's not as bad as the last track on the album.
Okay, so to that end, the album ends with yet another ballad, and the word I would use is anticlimactic. Talk to us about It's Not Too Late. So I think we're in agreement again on this one.
This is my least favorite song on the album. I mean, it's not a horrible song. It's not like a deal breaker or anything like that, but it's a Davey track. This is it's the epitome of what I was talking about earlier. It's that lovey, happy-go-lucky songwriting style, and it's not my favorite. Definitely not.
Sean, you're running out of tracks of the week, so I'm either you're not playing the game or this is it. So
if Sean loves this track, I'm out. I don't know what to do.
This is my song of the week.
Yeah, there we go. I like it. Why is this your song of the week?
Because it was like the one song.
Because the album was over and you realized you didn't have to listen to it anymore.
No, like seriously, this is like the one song on the album that actually sounded like, oh, okay, this is what this band's supposed to sound like. It's like pop music. It's a decent pop song. I like the brightness of it. Good chorus, really good vocals. I thought whoever's singing lead on this should have been singing on the entire album. And it could have been tighter. It's not like a perfect song, but like I actually liked the lyrics too. I thought they were affecting, and it had some kind of emotional weight to it. And it was the first time I was not distracted by anything, and I was able to kind of get into a song. So yeah, this is easily the song of the week for me.
All right, Chris, I want to hear your thoughts, but before we get there, let's listen to It's Not Too Late.
Sailing to the wind, my love, before we run around. It's not too late to say that I love
Chris, why don't you take us home? Talk to us about this this last track on Justice.
I'm with Sean. I like this song. I think it's the right song to end the album, especially because towards the end it just feels like everyone's just involved and just bringing the whole thing to a close. As a Monkees fan, I look at it as if like it's not too late is kind of a way of them saying like it's not too late for all four of us to get into a room and make an album together, even after many years of not doing so. And I think what Sean said is really pinpoint, like right on that. Like this feels like what you would think a Monkees song would sound like if you didn't know, all of the Auntie's Municipal Courts and some of the offbeat songs that, casual listeners might not know. So I feel like between this and You and I feel like those are really the two, like, and naturally they're, Davey-led vocals, but I feel like that's kind of the songs that people, I think, would expect to hear from the Monkees. And I think that when you're kind of like a diehard fan, you're looking for some of the stuff that's a little bit different from this. So I could definitely see like the viewpoint of both Carrie and Sean on this one. But I think it's like a solid tune to end things on. I like it as the last track. It's
the
like
longest track on the album too.
Yeah, that's it. It feels the most like orchestrated and involved. Like you'd mentioned during the break about like there's an organ going on. Like there's there's a lot musically happening here, and I just think
everybody was on top form, definitely on the song.
Yeah, I would have
not denying that.
I think that an interesting exercise would be like to reorder the track list on this album in a more maybe a more flowing sort of way. But I think if I were to do that, I would still keep this as the last song.
You know what I think about the song? I'm listening to it again over and over, and it feels very sitcom theme song to me.
Yes.
I think that's what it is, maybe. It's just this, especially the last minute or so. I'm like, that could just be like a theme song, intro to like a really cheesy 90s TV show.
Full House was the first thing that came to mind for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating. Well, that brings us to the end, and this was one of the more intriguing chats I think we've ever had about an album on the podcast, but I can't let you go without rating the album on a scale of 1 to 10. So I'm going to kick it over to you, Chris, as I always do at this point. Scale of 1 to 10. What are you giving the Monkees Justice?
A lot higher than I thought I was going into this. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I just overall, it's kind of cool because I got to listen to some Monkees songs that I just didn't really know that well. And we've kind of reached a point where we probably won't have any more new Monkees songs to listen to. So join us next week when we do Good Times. But I thought this was a really... I feel like I definitely underrated this album before Carrie made it his mission to make me listen to it, and I'm glad that he did.
Good Time's a much better album than this. I'll start with that.
But Carrie, what are you giving this?
7 I thought was pretty generous from you, Chris. I would probably, there's stuff I really like on this album, and there's stuff that I'm sort of just middle of the road of. I'm going to give it a 7 as well. I was looking at maybe like a 6.5, but 7 seems about right.
Okay.
Are we going to guess for Sean?
I want to just go on record. We've had some low scores throughout this. We've covered some black metal that may have missed the mark with Chris.
Yeah.
We know we joke perpetually about his love affair with Joey Belladonna and some of the old Anthrax stuff. I think we may be in uncharted waters here. Scale of 1 to 10, can't go lower than a 1, Sean. What are you giving this album?
Well, you could give it a 0 if you really want to.
What's the? Because I've heard so many episodes of the podcast, I can't remember anything being less than a 6.
We've had some 5s. We've had some I think 5s and maybe a 4.
I think Celtic Frost was our collectively our worst. I gave Monotheist a 2, and Justin gave it a 3.5.
Wow.
Didn't click. Sorry, Mark. It just didn't click. But
so it's my turn now. Uh, see, I don't want to be mean or anything. Like,
No, we
but you
just
have to be honest.
We just asked
This
you
is
to be
your honest
honest.
opinion.
That's all.
if you ask me to be honest, like honestly, I think giving it a 1 is generous.
Oh my!
Because like I've never, it's rare that I have albums that make me mad. The last one that did before this was that stupid Angus McSix album, and that infuriated me. So like, it's rare for that to happen.
Are you going to write an article now based on
No.
your experience listening
No.
to this? Because that would be
And
outstanding.
the thing is, like, I really gave this a shot. I was like listening to it like all
Yeah,
last week.
That's
and
all
into
we.
this
That's
week.
all we asked.
That's right.
And man, it was a rough album to listen to. So I'm going to say 1 because it's just like I never have to listen to it again for the rest of my life, and I'm never going to.
That is not true. Every time you come over now, I'm playing it.
No, man, this is
He's not coming over anymore. That's why you're not hearing it. The first time I listened to this, I was like, what the hell did I get myself into? I'm going to kill you guys. But no, eventually it got to the point where it was listenable for me for sure. There were some tracks that I enjoyed and some which I don't care for. I'm going to give it a 5. So I liked the other album we covered considerably better. I thought that even if they had ghostwriters, they were great songs on that album, which I really enjoyed. But at the same time, there was enough here that I could at least say, you know, I didn't hate it. It was not my favorite album. But that being said, I really appreciated the chat. I thought it was a really interesting discussion. So I want to thank both of you guys. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find your show and how they can listen to you guys and you know, kind of what your podcast is about?
Sure. So we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of doing MSRcast.
Wow.
It originally started as a fanzine back in the day that Sean was part of way back when we first knew each other. And I'm so happy that Sean has been my co-host. It's almost over 10 years for now, for sure. We have a new album or new episode coming. I almost said album. Like I'm starting that doom metal band. only doing
Monkeys covers.
We have a new episode that's coming out this weekend. We talk about a lot of cool new metal. You can find us all over the internet, msrcast.com, or our sister show, which is Metal Geeks at themetalgeeks.net. We're all over the social medias. If you're on Facebook, we have a Facebook group over there, the Metal Geek Society. And we're anywhere you can download a podcast.
And
even your refrigerator.
Yeah. Technology is a crazy thing, but
Sure.
lots of fun stuff in store that I think we'll be able to talk about in the coming weeks and months for both us and some other friends of ours out there. So I'll just dangle that for now.
That little carrot.
Yeah, just that little nugget to get people thinking.
And I don't want to take away from Sean, but where can people? Because Sean's a great prolific writer. I want him to be able to let people know.
I absolutely second that. By the way, Sean is a phenomenal writer, and we'd be remiss to not share where people could check out his stuff.
Just don't write an article about the monkeys. I'll be happy.
No, themetalpigeon.com and Metal Pigeon at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening. I'm going to just say this. Thanks again for everyone's support for listening. Obviously, to all of our Patreons, we appreciate you very, very much. It helps keep the show going. I'm going to keep things on point for our kind of Halloween themed offbeat October, although I think that my album for next week is somewhat more in the traditional vein, but it's definitely got a Halloween feel to it in certain respects.
It's the Monster Mash.
Yeah, that's not a bad pivot. I'm actually thinking about that. But I'm going to keep everyone in suspense. When the album hits your feed next week, you'll see what it is. I've already told you, Chris, offline so that you could start giving it a listen. And we will catch everyone real soon when we come back next week with another album. That's a bit of a surprise.
And Justin, that's going to be our just about our third anniversary.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even realize that. So
our first episode dropped on October 26, 2020, right in the midst of a raging pandemic, and that's kind of how the whole thing was born, out of having some free time. So it's pretty cool that we've gone this far. We have a long way to go to reach the MSR Cast's longevity, but I'd like to think in 17 years we'll still be doing this, God willing. So
doing more Monkees albums. So Sean, get ready to listen again. But I
on
digress.
the bright side, like I mentioned before, they're not going to be making any new ones. So
We'll have time to catch up. But thanks again to everyone for listening. We'll be back next week, and stay safe, everyone. Talk soon.
thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No excuses, for the truth is, it's my life now.